You're listening to the Roofing Success Podcast, a show created to inspire roofing contractors to achieve optimal success in their roofing businesses. I'm the host, Jim Moline, the co-author of the book, Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors, How to Triple Your Sales and Turn Your Roofing Website into an Online Lead Generation Machine. I'm also the co-founder of Roofer Marketers, the digital marketing agency for the roofing industry. On each episode, I'll be sitting down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons they've learned, and how to find success in roofing. Welcome to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. As always, please share, subscribe, comment, like wherever you're at. If you're on iTunes, whether you're on YouTube watching this, just give us that love back. And then if you're interested in continuing the conversation further beyond the episode, please go to Facebook, type in Roofing Success, and join the Roofing Success Facebook group. We'll be able to continue these conversations and go a little bit deeper for everyone. So today we're gonna talk about the advice that contractors need, and sometimes they get advice at the right advice at the wrong stage of their business. Right. And it really depends on where you're at in your business as to what you need to be implementing and what makes sense. And you know, there's a lot of, I don't want to call it noise, right? I don't want to call it noise, but there's a lot of noise coming at you when you're a business owner, right? There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of conversation going on. You know, if you're going to events or watching live events on, you know, there's some great virtual events that have happened this year. And you're just hearing all these things. And so our guest today, Nathan Tebedo of Contractor Coach Pro, and I were having this conversation. We were just down at Win the Storm together, and it's like, man, there's such great information. But who needs that information and when? So Nathan has some great insights into that. And Nathan, the coach at Contractor Coach Pro, thanks for joining us.
Hey, what's going on, Jim?
How are you
doing
man?
Today?
For anyone that doesn't know you guys and what Contractor Coach Pro is, why don't you do a little intro?
Sure. So Contractor Coach Pro is a collection of expert coaches who have an enormous amount of experience in the industry. Some with a very broad base of knowledge and some with some very specific bases of knowledge. And our entire purpose and goal is to inspire people to believe and to help people believe in what it is they're trying to accomplish, that they can accomplish it, help to figure out what that thing is, and then help them build their business, kind of reverse engineer it from what they're after to being able to accomplish it, taking it from a dream to a thing you know or feel or attacking with everything you've got. And so that's what we do at Contractor Coach Pro. We do events, we do podcasts, we do content creation, but really at the core is the coaching, is working directly with contractors to help them get where they want to go.
That's awesome, man. And you guys do a great job of it. So
thank you.
You know, so when we were talking the other day, you're like, man, there's really 4 stages, kind of general stages of a roofing contractor or a contracting business. You want to let's start there and talk about those stages a little bit.
Sure. So these are not necessarily all black and white per se. So there's some variation and some nuance to where people's businesses are at. But I think the 4 main categories that we typically see is you've got the guy who's launching his business or has launched it, and that guy or that gal, we might call him Chuck in a truck or maybe Jan in a van, I've heard recently, which I thought was clever. And this person is doing everything. They're either by themselves or maybe they have an assistant or somebody that helps them out a little bit, but they're doing all their own marketing and prospecting and sales. They're handling all their own estimates. They're handling all their own scope and all their own production scheduling and management and quality control. They're sending out their own invoices. They're running their own QuickBooks. Like the everything from start to finish is this one person show, excuse me, who is very, very busy. They've got a lot of things to do. Even though their volume might not be big, it's a lot of volume for one person. I would say a real common range, if you're wondering what stage you're at, a real common range is anywhere from, from zero to $1 million, maybe $1.5 million if you're really good and really organized, is that kind of that first stage. The second stage that we typically see is as this person has begun to figure out, I can't do all this on my own, I need some help. We kind of call this like the friends and family stage. And it's not a bad thing. As your business starts to grow, birds of a feather flock together. And so as our business starts to grow and we start to see opportunities, we kind of reach out to the people in our flock who are the closest to us. So it could be your best friend, could be your wife, could be your kid, could be your mom or dad, or somebody along the way, a brother or sister who you bring into your company, and you might have a few of them. Maybe mom's handling the books. I see that pretty regularly. And then the son is working on production. And then the best friend got brought in maybe to do some sales stuff. And so these guys, we're talking probably that little over $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.5 million, up to $2 million, maybe a little beyond. They're in that number. And they're comprised mostly of people who are close to them. The next stage is when we start to move beyond friends and family. Now we're starting to think about the concept of actually building a business, and we're starting to hire strangers, for lack of a better term. They're not people that we have a relationship with. We've maybe put some ads out on one of the recruiting sites, or we're asking for referrals, and we're bringing people into our business who are not directly connected to us. And we're starting to try and nail out job descriptions, and we're starting to try and figure out our processes a little bit better. These guys, we're probably looking at, I don't know, maybe 3.5 million, maybe into that 4 or 5, once again, just depending on your skill level, right? So now we're kind of beyond friends and family into the team, right? We're trying to build a bit of a team, a core team for our business. And then beyond that are companies who are now looking at the concept of scaling. Right now, we're thinking about how to refine these processes, and we're starting to try to figure out, like, we're trying to move away from everybody wearing a lot of hats to people wearing more specific hats, right? And so that's when that concept of trying to scale your company and get real efficient, and handle that, having fewer things fall through the cracks, through efficiencies, through technologies. And that's where that whole component where we're ready to and trying to scale. And that number could be anywhere from 5 to 7 to 8 to 10 in there, as those people try to make their way out of that phase and try to really see that hockey stick growth.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good way to put it, because and everyone's business is going to be a little bit different. Everyone's going to start from a little bit of a different place. You'd mentioned if you're efficient in certain things. So some people may, be really good at sales, right? Some people are really good on the production side or operations, or, so your skill sets along the way are going to really kind of also, fluctuate into that conversation, right? Of where you should take this thing. So it's not, so we got a lot of gray area here, but there are some things that are consistent. And one of the things that just kind of gets hammered in the conversation in a lot of the industry education and things like that is implement your processes, nail down your SOPs, get this stuff all nailed. You got to get this stuff in line. So in regards to that, let's go through the 4 stages to those contractors and say, hey, with this advice at this stage, what should I be doing with that? Right. So for the chuck in a truck, Jan in a van, I like that one too, man. What should they be doing, or what do you feel they should be doing in setting up and implementing processes in their business?
Right. It's a great topic, and it's a great question, because there are a lot of great educators out there. There are a lot of great gurus, and frankly, there's a lot of great free information, podcasts and videos on social media, and people who do short snippets and longer snippets, and people who have an ebook, and people who publish a blog. And a lot of really great information out there, right? And one of the struggles is, okay, well, what piece of information should I be attacking first?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's buzzwords, right? Buzzwords like 10xing your business. I think scaling is a buzzword too. Oh, everybody's got to scale. We got to scale. I figure out how to scale. Um, Another one is culture, how critical culture is, and when does, that should be done immediately, or is that something we worry about down the road? Another one I was just thinking of the other day too was legacy. Oh, what's the legacy of our business going to be, right? Well, depending on where you're at, you should be focused on different levels of advice. So, for example, if you're a Chuck in a truck or Jan in a van, you probably shouldn't be too concerned about the concept of scaling just yet, right? You probably shouldn't be. I mean, I think legacy is a cool concept to have in your mind, but I don't know if I'd be super concerned about what my company is going to look like 20 or 30 years from now. I'm a little more concerned about making sure I'm still in business next year,
Yeah.
right?
What is it, Nathan? Like 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years or something
It's
like
a
that,
high number. I think
right?
it's
It's a
it's 80.
high
I think it's
number. Yeah.
85 to 86 fail within the first three.
Within the first three,
So
right?
if you're
Like,
listening to this and you've been in business for 4 or 5 years, congratulations, pat yourself on the back. Like, you're still
for sure,
here, right?
for sure.
And so there are different milestones too for each of these stages of business. So if you're a Chuck in a truck or Jan in a van, you're a one man, one woman show, you're running everything solo. One of the most critical things for you to be thinking about and advice that maybe you should be seeking or looking for are things like um, personal discovery, right? What are you good at?
Hmm.
Are you really good at the details and the operation sides of things? Are you really good at the sales and the revenue generation side of things? We need, like, who am I? Okay, now we're not worried about building out and hiring 10 sales guys just yet, okay, or having this elaborate massive production department, but who should your first hire be? Right? Your first or second hire, if you're that solo operator. And the way to figure that out is, number one, we got to know ourselves, right? We got to know who we are. And if we just go hire somebody else that's just like us, then we're going to be stepping all over each other's toes on things that we both love doing. And then the things that we both hate doing are never going to get done, right? So we need to know what our strengths are. And then the next component that we need to consider is time management, right? So if I'm a solo person and I know I'm pretty good at generating revenue, okay, I know I'm good at generating revenue, and I'm not bad at running my own jobs, because it's not a lot of jobs, it's just a few. Then I probably need somebody to help me with some of the more minutia or more detailed stuff that I find myself doing at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. till midnight, running all my invoices, dealing with my, tracking all my receipts, sending out emails to customers, maybe, contacting people who need to be contacted, like some of the more smaller details. So if that's the case, then, and I'm decent at generating revenue, my first hire should probably be something like an administrator, right? And when we think, okay, but that's going to increase my overhead, that's right. But if that administrator can buy you another 10 hours a week worth of time, how much more revenue do you think you could generate with that 10 hours a week? Odds are it dwarfs whatever that admin's going to cost, right?
Definitely. Definitely.
So I would be thinking about who I am and what I'm good at, my own time management. Okay, where can I buy myself some time to excel at what I'm good at? Okay, which should help you determine who that next hire is going to be. And then maybe before or as I hire that person, I might start delving into processes, because that's kind of the first question you started with. Because if I do hire somebody and bring them in, I'm not looking for a robot. I'd love to be able to give that person a basic template of how things happen inside my business. We don't need to go we don't need to dig a well to the center of the earth on how deep our process is. We just need to have some basic stuff understood so that I can have some information to give this new hire about, okay, when this thing happens, it now pops into your hands. And then once this thing is in your hands, then you're going to do these things. So some basic processes should be on your mind if you're running as that solo operator.
For sure. I like to say that hire what you procrastinate on. Like that's what I started doing it when in our business. Like when I find myself at 9 o'clock at night, like, oh, I got to get this thing done. I'm trying to get this thing done. And I find myself at 9 o'clock at night multiple times trying to do the same thing. I know that I pushed that down my to-do list too many times, right?
Yes, that's a good one.
And and so I'm like, that's the person I need next, someone to do that. and,
Mm-hmm.
and a
Mm-hmm.
simple process definitely makes that easy. So now moving into like now when you have that small team moving, as your business grows, now you've hired that person to take a couple of those things off your plate, and you've been able to spend more time on the things that you're good at. Now you got to that $1.5–2 million mark. Now what are you thinking about in terms of those processes?
Excuse me. Now I'm thinking efficiencies. Okay. Because a lot of people start thinking, well, now I just need to start hiring people into this thing that I've got. But when you're in that friends and family stage, it's probably a lot of fun. Hopefully you're seeing some growth, right? You're getting to work with people you love. And sometimes there's a little frustration with that, but that's okay. It's normal. But are we maximizing everybody's output? So this is when you start seeing people, like when you're the solo operator, all the hats are on your head. Well, now you've started to hire a few more people in. Is everybody trying to wear the same hats? So now we want to refine those processes a little bit better, because what happens is people think that just hiring other people is going to create more time for everybody automatically. That is not the case, especially if you run out and start trying to hire salespeople in particular. What happens is that now there's more training involved. The paperwork and processing for payroll and insurances and things like all that just became more complicated. There's more administrative work when you start hiring other people. So the question then becomes, okay, how can we do more with what we have before we try to build and have more? Okay. So now we probably want to start taking a little bit deeper dive into our processes and start assigning people specific things that they're supposed to do and start to get more efficient. Because what I've noticed is that, it's a whole lot less expensive to get better with what you have than to bring in an unknown quantity and try to make that thing good. Right. And so this is also one of those stages where the idea about your ideas of culture might need to start. Okay. Because the next stage is where culture can sink your ship. So this one right here is where I might start thinking, okay, I probably do need to have a good understanding of who our company is and what we're all about. The other question I would start asking myself at this friends and family stage is, excuse me, what's our dream? Okay. Hopefully, if you've got your friends and family around you and you've hopefully created a little more time and capacity for yourself as an owner, and you can start thinking about, okay, where do I want to take this thing? We're starting to see some success and we're starting to gain some momentum. Where are we going? When we come to a fork in the road and it's like, hey, we could get into solar or we could start doing windows. Is that what you want to do? Well, that's all dependent on where you're headed, right? So getting more detailed about your processes in order to generate efficiencies, and also start thinking about how you're going to track stuff. So maybe a little bit of technology, maybe instituting some CRMs, maybe having maybe a few general spreadsheets. I'm not a big fan of spreadsheets, but you know what? They're an inexpensive way to track stuff. Okay. And then also thinking a little bit on the marketing side. Once again, you don't want to go head first into marketing, because I tell you what, there's a lot of phenomenal marketers out there who are going to help you generate leads, but they can also be very expensive and you might not be ready for that expense just yet. So we got to keep an eye on that overhead. We don't want to dump a bunch of weight on our overhead when we don't have the processes and systems in place to really crank up our revenue. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me, because I have some of those conversations, especially on the marketing side. I have those conversations every day. And one thing I want to kind of circle back to is the where do we want to take this thing, right? So at this stage, when we're thinking about where do we want to take this thing, clients that we have, there's some clients that we have that are $4 or $5 million a year companies, and that's what they want to be. That's what they are, right? And they really understand that. They really understand their core competency, their perfect customer. They really understand who they want to be. And then we have other clients who like we have clients that want to be that are in the mid $20 million mark right now and want to be $100 million companies, potentially $1 billion companies, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that is a much different dream, right? And so how does a contractor kind of make some internal reflect internally and figure out where they want to be? And not that it has to always stay that way, but if you're at that mark, what kind of advice would you give someone that was like as to, hey, this is maybe a good way to determine what you want to be in the future?
So I have no doubt you've heard this as well, that when people start thinking about the future of their company, a really common thing that I hear is, I don't want to have to be in the business every single day.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I feel like I'm working in my business versus on my business. Right. I want my business to run smoothly and efficiently without me there. I hear that a lot. I mean, probably 8 out of 10 times is that's what somebody puts that out there as their dream. Their dream is to not have to be working 70, 80 hours a week, right? That's a great dream. Okay. But if we really want to create something that we believe in and get excited about, my question is usually, okay, so if you don't want to be working 80 hours a week and you don't want to work 60 hours a week, okay, you're trying to get by yourself some time so you don't have to be in that business. What would you rather be doing? Right? Well, I mean, so do you want to sit down and play Xbox all afternoon? Do you want to play some more golf? Are you trying to travel? Is there another business that you want to open? So the question is, if you don't want to work 80 hours a week, I don't blame you. What would you rather be doing? Could be time with family.
Yep.
Could be all kinds of things. Whatever your answer to, whatever your answer is to, I'd rather be doing X, whatever it is, that is where we start creeping into the dream a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. My wife and I have been talking seriously about getting another house. The house I've had for years. It's not a big house, and I love it that way because I'm kind of a minimalist in a lot of ways. But there's some things that we're thinking about that are going to kind of need to have a little bit more space for us. And so the idea of buying another house, to me, in a way, if it's just phrased or thought about that way, I don't really get excited about that, because I know it means, getting pre-qualified for a loan, figuring out how much of a down payment I need, thinking about interest rates, thinking about what my mortgage is going to be, which is going to go up. It's not going to be the same as this place. And so I don't get real excited about that component. However, when I start to think about what I want in this next house, like, I'd like maybe a 2 or 3 car garage. That'd be pretty cool. I could have a shop out there. Maybe I could build a gym. I'd like my office to have numerous windows so I get a ton of natural light. My wife actually loves flipping furniture, she just loves doing it. She likes picking up furniture. So having a shop for her, maybe having a big shed or something like that out back where she can work on her stuff and do that kind of thing. Having a bigger kitchen. And when I start envisioning these little details, okay, then I start getting excited about buying another house. Now I'm like, okay, cool. What does this thing look like? What do I really, really want? Not just, I need more space. Because that just doesn't, I know that if I get more space, I'm just going to fill it up with more crap, right?
That's right.
That doesn't excite me. Okay. But all these other little details that I've built around what this house could be and what I could do with it. I could have my own home gym, because going to the gym has been a nightmare over the last year and a half, trying to figure out when you can go. And if you can't, you got to wear a mask. You don't wear a mask, you schedule time. But if I had my own home gym, oh man, like, so now all of a sudden I'm excited about this dream around a new house. So I think when you start thinking about the dream, you gotta start coloring in the lines and putting some color to this thing. What does it look like? And what are some of those details that you get excited about?
That's great advice. And that is where the motivation comes from then, right? It's not just having a big house, right? There's so much more to it. Um, in also another thing that you mentioned was about marketing.
Mm.
And this is where this is the conversation that we have often, right? And we actually have contractors that get upset with us
Mm-mm.
because we tell them that you're not in a position to to use our services yet. You need to do some other things first. And that's why we do the education that we do. We have the books that we've published. We have the webinar series that we do. We have the podcast here. We do all of these other things for those people that hopefully that'll get them to where they're able to use us.
Right.
But I see it too many times with other, marketing companies that are just trying to sell you a service or sell contractors a service. And they sell them on the dream of Facebook ads or the dream of SEO or the dream of direct mail or the whatever the dream is, right? And I think that was very insightful that you said this is where you should start to think about it in that 1.5, 2 million-ish mark. That's what I see too. Like until you're in that area and consistent, like not just that you hit it this year, like it, because I think a marketing budget should be, when you're actually putting a real marketing budget together, that should be based on your goal revenue, right? Not what you did last year. It's what you did next, what you want to do. And if you're, when you're in that, 1.5, $2 million mark, and it's tough to put that budget together, right? It's tough to put a budget together that's significant enough to go to market with, right? Like Google ads are expensive, right? Facebook ads aren't getting cheaper. There's a lot of
eat you up.
Right. So and you have to be able to maintain and withstand paying that budget as you're building out your, those assets, right? Direct mail campaigns might not work that first mailing. You may not get a job from it, right? You may need multiple long-term connections and, with these homeowners to drive those sales. So I really like that part of it too, because that's another thing that gets said a lot is just go, no, just here. Well, marketers market themselves to say, just go give us money and we'll get you from that 1.5 to 5. No problem, man. We just few Facebook ads, few Google ads, you're good to go. Like it's so
right.
Drives me nuts.
Well, and you think about the whole persona and brand of that business, from that solo operator to the family, is that person.
The person.
People call the company because they're like, hey, is Bill there? I want him to come look at my house. And Bill's the owner, right? And so, and Bill, has done a great job of building a client base, but they're all attached to Bill, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, your number one source of leads when you're in this range are the people that you've already done business with, number one. And then number two, the people who you tried to do business with who you didn't.
Yeah.
Right. Those are your, and you know how much it costs to get back to those people? Well, some time, right?
Yeah.
Sending out some letters, maybe making some phone calls. And there's a lot of business to be generated in that space. But when Bill's not going to be doing all the sales anymore, there needs to be a little bit different persona that's more about the business itself rather than just Bill. So there's a transition phase in there where now you start thinking a little bit about this concept of branding and lead generation, but you probably can't afford to spend $2,500 a month on your website and your social media just yet. That stuff takes time. So do you happen to have 60 grand sitting in the bank that you can dump into this over the next 3 years while you're hoping that this thing starts to work?
Yeah. And there's things that you could do on your own, right? There are things that make an impact on your own. Getting reviews on your Google My Business listing, mainly there. That's where I like people to focus on first, until they have enough reviews that they're at least in the conversation with the bigger competitors in their market, right?
Sure.
If the people you're competing with in your local market have 50, 80 reviews, then you better get there as quickly as possible, right? That's your first goal. And those are things that you could do on your own that don't cost money, right? That aren't, big outlays of cash. That a lot of times we think of marketing as lead generation, but lead generation is different than marketing. Marketing is long-term. There are short-term aspects of it, but most of the time it's a longer-term effort. You're building your brand. You're becoming, you want to, the way I've been kind of describing it recently, Nathan, is I'll say, where do people go first when they're looking for a roofing company?
where did they go in their minds? I mean, I would say, for me, the first place I'm wondering is, have any of my
Do,
friends,
do
like,
I know someone, right?
yeah, do I know somebody? Yeah, yeah. Do I know
Right?
somebody, or
Do I
does one
know
of my
someone?
friends know somebody?
Do I know a good company? Do I know a good company? If it's not in your mental Rolodex, right? If there is not a company for that service, plumbing, contracting, dentist, if there is not a company in your mental Rolodex, now you're going two ways. You're going to your friends and family, like you mentioned, or you're going to Google, right? There's that's about the road you
Sure.
travel right now, right? But the first place is in that mental Rolodex. And as you mentioned, that's where that first business gets generated. You can build $1.5 million company off of just the people you know and them knowing you and knowing what you do,
Mm,
right? Then you can expand
100%.
on that, right? Then you can expand on that. So now I guess now we're moving into the small business phase, right? What kind of,
Yeah.
now it's getting exciting. Now you're hiring people, like you said, that are outside of your circle, right?
Yeah, these are people you don't know, right? We're not necessarily sure what their core values are. We're not necessarily sure what their work ethic is. We try to vet them as best we can. And
yeah,
the better you are at that, right? Then the better people you'll probably be able to draw to yourself. This is when the concept, I mean, I would say that you should consistently have culture on your mind pretty much from the start, like who you want to be and what's important to you. But where culture can really bite you on the hiney and not knowing that and having that documented and communicated. So, for example, with some of my friends and I, once again, birds of a feather. A lot of us don't necessarily have to communicate our core values to one another because we've known each other for so long, and we know we're pretty similar in a lot of different ways. So that's kind of unspoken. We get along really well because we value the same things and we have a lot of similarities. When I hire somebody I don't know, now we run into a situation where these things need to be communicated. This is who we are. This is our purpose. This is where we're headed. This is the vision that we have. So now we start talking about things that take a little bit more time to develop. As an owner, as the managers, as the partners, what is our vision for this business? If somebody wanted to work here, why would they be excited about working here? Number one, that's where your vision comes in and your ability to communicate that vision. And the best way to do it is to sit down and try and write it out. Right. And then the next component is our why as a company. What are we all about? Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? What is our why? Right. Then having some core values. The core values are our standard of behavior. Right. You may not necessarily have the same personal core values as the company, and that's okay. But as a team and as a group, we expect these behaviors, or we expect our actions, the things that we do in the field and in the office, we expect those actions to align with this set of values, right? And those things need to be documented. They need to be posted. They need to be talked about. They need to be enforced and measured as much as we possibly can. And when we do that, okay, now all of a sudden that we're going to create a persona of who we are that, number one, ties our company together in a real sticky way because we're all on the same team. And it will probably also begin to attract people who are the same. People who look at that company and they go, oh my goodness, look at, I see what they do on social media. I see who they are. I've seen how they operate. I've seen them around. I would love to be a part of that. At Contractor Coach Pro, we just did a shameless plug for Contractor Radio. We just did an interview with one of our clients at the roofing company in South Carolina, and their culture is powerful. And we talked a little bit about that. So when you're moving beyond friends and family into actually building a team, a core team around you, we need to make sure that those people are on board, because there are definitely situations where companies try to build a team, and because the culture isn't well established, there isn't a standard of behavior or an ethic. And now all of a sudden we start to see some drama. We start to see some backbiting. We start to see a little bit of arguments. We start to see some struggles. And that stuff in a microcosm is kind of natural. We're all humans working together. But there needs to be something that we can point to and say, this is how we do things and this is who we are. And so we need to be aligned with that. So when you're into this building a team thing, just your idea and concept of who you are as an owner and a leader, When you're a solo operator and you're dealing with friends and family, that stuff tends to be pretty self-evident. But when you start hiring those strangers, that's got to be communicated. Now we're starting to think, okay, we need to have our systems and processes we need to take a much deeper dive into this. That manual of how we do what we do needs to be more detailed, because the more detailed it is and the better it is to understand, the fewer calls that you get from your team. Hey, Jim, how do I do this? Hey, Jim, how do I do that? I forgot where I go to log this thing. I forgot well, like you become Google in your business, right? You don't know how to do something or you're curious about something, we Google it. Well, in your business as the owner, if somebody doesn't know something, guess what they do? You're Google for them. So now a deep dive into our processes becomes more important, and then also parsing out what everybody's specific roles and things are that they're supposed to do, and having job descriptions and incentive packages that reflect those things, that incentivize people, because we all do want to make money and achieve our dreams, right? So now we start getting into some of these nitty gritty components about building a business. Right now, we really need to start thinking about our market offering. What makes us true? Because if I'm going to hire a salesperson, that salesperson can't stand in front of a homeowner and say, I'm the owner of the business, that's why you should hire me. That is a massive value proposition that owners and partners have when they're out there selling. Your salespeople can't say that. We need to arm them with a value proposition that they can all present to a customer that's identifiable. So now we start thinking about our actual sales strategies, and our sales processes. Okay. And then we want to start thinking about if I brought somebody aboard, how do I teach them this? So now we're starting to dig deeper into these components and starting to really refine what our business does, how it does it, and how we train people to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it really is. There's a I heard a great quote from Gary Vaynerchuk again recently. I've heard it a couple of times, but it just came on my radar again recently. And it's that hiring is guessing, firing is knowing.
That's a good quote.
Right. Like, and this is the time when you're taking on those people. So you're doing a lot of guessing, right? You're doing your best guess at
Sure.
who can fill that role, and that well-defined role that you have. And you're moving beyond those friends and family. Interesting. A couple episodes ago, we had a guest on, Miguel Tavares with Blue Hammer Roofing, and they have a kind of a recruiting strategy where this is what made me think of it, is they have a recruiting strategy around the friends and family of their employees. So that's how they're kind of building out that culture, is they're continuing their, like, they started with their culture and then with their friends and family, and then they keep expanding on that culture, right? Between those friends and family members, where it's that known kind of understood culture, as you were kind of mentioning in the beginning there. Like that, I thought that was interesting.
That's a
And interesting.
massive, I mean, that is a massive way to do it.
Yeah,
Massive. I mean, number one, it's one of the least expensive ways to find people.
that's right.
Number two, you can incentivize your employees to hire their friends who they'd love to work with anyway to come be a part of this thing.
Yeah.
And so if I've got employees who fit my culture really well, odds are good they know other people who'd probably fit their culture very, very well, because birds of a feather, right? So I'm like, hey, let's reach a little further outside this circle, out into the bigger, broader flock. Do you know anybody who you'd love to work with here who you think would fit?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I do that like with Contractor Coach Pro. There's been numerous times I've literally thought, man, we could use some people here at Contractor Coach to help us out. It would be awesome if I could hire one of my friends to come work here. Do I know anybody who has a skill set that would fit in really well here? Because I just love to have some of my best friends working here with me. How much fun would that be? Right. Now, there is some danger in it though. So
for sure,
it's not all roses and rainbows here. There's got to be some well set and established standards and expectations laid out, so that if we do happen to run into a not such a good fit or a performance situation, we're not ruining relationships. If somebody just doesn't happen to fit, look, man, that's okay. So
that's right.
There's some caution in there, and it's hard to over communicate. right? And one of the number one situations that runs to frustration and conflict is a lack of communication. And then when you're in the conflict, the communication just becomes heated and emotional. And we want to try and minimize that as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, you had mentioned, I think, like enforcement of these values, or the culture enforcement of these things. I can't remember how you phrased it, but it was, you know, consistently in your business. When you get to this level and you have multiple employees, people have to be treated the same, right? Somebody doesn't show up for work. Hey, this is what happens because of that, right? This happens, right? You do this happens. There's a, or in a punishment or a reward. Hey, you do this and you get rewarded. You do this and you get punished, right? But a lot of times I think business owners in that stage, they don't have maybe the full team yet, and they'll let this person slide and that person slide, and then it gets a little shaky in that regard.
When you start getting into this range too, and this is a good segue for it, is another place where we need to start thinking about flexing that leadership muscle. A lot of us, like, we've been working in our business as a solopreneur, as friends and family, and we're so head down in the business. And then as we start to add people to do these things, now we're less concerned about each and every estimate. We're less concerned about every single sales appointment. We're not the ones running all the books, right? But our concern needs to be the people who are. And so if we don't develop our leadership while also adding people to our team, that's another thing where you'll see a massive failure in companies, is that they were so concerned with getting all of these details and components built, so they weren't so involved with everything, that they forgot, I probably need to get better at leading and mentoring and coaching, because that will become a bigger part of your role as a leader and as a manager, as a partner, whatever that upper level role you have. People become your job, not necessarily the particulars of everything that happens inside your business. And you need to be really good at having people as your job.
Yeah, that's great. And you'll really need that in moving into when you're scaling, right? Which is the next phase, right?
Yeah.
Like, so maybe not flexing that leadership muscle, but developing that leadership muscle. This is when you're putting reps in, right? This is where you're at.
You got to be able to develop leaders, right? Because you're no longer the only leader in the business now.
Yeah.
So now it's not just, I'm good at leading this team. I need to be good at picking out and knowing which people in this team need to then become leaders, so that they can handle this next layer of folks that we're bringing into our fold. And so now it's not just, am I a good leader? It's, am I a leader of leaders? Am I a builder of leaders? Right. And so when we move into this concept of scaling, okay, once again, now we've come all the way now to this buzzword.
Yeah.
That so many people were worried about way back here, and they didn't need to be worried. Now we're up here to this point where the word scaling starts to matter. Okay. The word now scaling, many people know what it is. Many people aren't totally sure what it is. Scaling is not simply adding more people who can do the same things. So if I've got Bill over here and Bill can wear 6 hats, scaling is not hiring another Bill who can also wear 6 hats. Scaling is hiring a Jeff who's going to take 3 of those hats, right? And then when we scale again, scaling is taking 2 of those hats off of Jeff and putting it on Jennifer. And then eventually we take 1 of those hats off of Jennifer. So what happens in scaling is this is when our systems and processes need to be as sharp and as clean and as detailed as they possibly can. Because what we're going to start to do is break off specific components of these different jobs, because now the volume for each component of that job has exceeded the capacity of the person who's supposed to be doing it. So that's when now all of a sudden you see companies who have a single person in charge of a single person in charge of accounts receivables, because we've got so much going on. That's one person's entire job. Whereas it used to be the job, whereas our bookkeeping, our AR, and our accounts payables used to be one person. Now we're at such a scale where accounts receivables is a full-time job for one person. Accounts payables is now a full-time job for one person. If you imagine all the different responsibilities of a sales manager, right? A typical sales manager is going to need to be able to recruit, interview, hire, train, coach. Okay. And then also they're going to be responsible for tracking sales numbers and closing ratios and cost of acquisition for leads. They're also going to need to be in charge of doing their employee reviews, maybe even approving jobs before they go to production, right? And when you've got 4 or 5 sales guys, maybe 6 or 7, you can probably handle it. When I got 15 sales guys, that job of just approving jobs used to be just a couple hours a week. Now it's 6 to 7, 10 hours a week. So we want to take that off of the sales manager and bring somebody. Now that's where that's scaling. And then everything that we've been building up to this point becomes more and more important. Our processes we just talked about, those are now more critical than ever. Our culture and the ability to communicate it and hire according to it is now more important than ever, because somebody else is now doing the hiring, and they're not hiring 2 or 3 people. They might be hiring 5, 6, 10 at a time. Our financial tracking is now a huge deal. Now, as an owner, I'm not necessarily so concerned about one job being at 30 or 40 or 45%. I'm concerned about what our average gross profit was over the course of a month or a quarter. Yeah, we might have a few jobs in there that weren't great. We might have a few jobs in there that were huge. Great, fine. But as the owner, I'm not looking at each individual job anymore. I'm looking at the total scale of where do we want to be at over the course of this whole month or quarter or half a year. Now your product offering and your ability to train and onboard people is even more critical than it's ever been before, right? Because sometimes with a bigger organization, it takes time for those mistakes and some of that lackadaisicalness to show up in the numbers eventually, right? So accountability and your ability to track the technologies, everything starts to become more and more critical. And so a lot of people who hit that scaling, they're like, man, I thought when I hit to the point where I would scale, I would have to do less. And no, you have to do more for more people at a greater level.
That's what what I've kind of one of the business lessons I've learned over time is that it's amazing how much more there is to do as your company grows.
I
Just
had a client like this happened just what, a year and a half ago. I had a client who I started working with, and he was a solopreneur. He was a chuck in a truck. He's a young guy, smart guy, sharp, hard worker. And when he came to me, he said, Nathan, I did 1.2 or something like that million by myself. And I was like, "Ooh, buddy." And he said, I'm not doing that again. He says,
yeah.
that'll just kill me. I can't. And so we began working with each other. And he has a great story. I think he's tripled his business by now. It's really a great story. He's got a big team. His wife quit her job and she's part of the team now, and they're just growing and they're doing great. And I had a chance to talk with him. I was like, so do you think you're any less busy now than you were then? And he said, no, not even close. He said, I'm just working on different things now.
That's what it is. You're working on different things. And that's where, some of those reflections that you have in those early, I think we were talking about maybe around the small team time and figuring out those dreams of where you want to be, you know, make sure that you realize that that's how the business goes, right? You may love to do one thing today, but if you want to have a 10, 15, $20 million company, you're going to have to do a lot of different things. And that may take some growth. That may take some pain, and it may not be what you realize you wanted.
That's a
Right.
huge point. I mean, a microcosm of that is if you think about when you were a kid or any of your kids, and your kids play sports and your kid plays baseball, or maybe they play soccer or golf or whatever it might be. And in their mind, they're thinking, I could be pro at this. And as an adult, you're going, okay, I mean, I don't ever want to crush your dreams, but you realize that we went to the driving range for 1 hour today. And if you want to be a pro, you're going to need to go to the driving range for 4 or 5 hours a day. We're going to need multiple different coaches. You're going to live, eat, sleep, and breathe this thing in order to play at the level that you're talking about trying to play at. And it doesn't seem real until you see somebody's dedication. And you're like, man, the amount of time that person spends. They spend 2 hours a day in the gym, right? And then after that, they go out and they do 500 free throws and they do 200 layups, right? And they practice dribbling for an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you said, when we're kids, we don't realize that kind of commitment and effort and the things you sacrifice to do that,
The
and so
stories
it doesn't
of
change in the contracting industry. Like, you want to run a 25, 30, $50 million business, you're talking about an enormous amount of work and development that it's going to take to do that. And those dreams are great. But when you start to realize what it took to get to 10 million or maybe 15, and you start going, well, I don't know. It's like when I talk to sales guys and I say, well, how much money do you want to make? Well, I want to make 300 grand a year. I'm like, great. Here's a plan for doing that. And then they say, well, maybe, and here's a block scheduling for you to accomplish this plan. Well, maybe I'm okay with 150, right? Or maybe I'm good. Maybe I'll get lucky and pop a big job and do 175. I think I'd probably be happy with that once you start to see that work level and workload.
Know what you'll be happy with, and that can change. It doesn't have to be the same. When you get to certain levels, you may go, yep. And that's why there's like a lot of our clients and some people, and they like to be in that 5 million mark. They kind of love to be in that like 5, 6, maybe 8, like 8 on a good storm year, kind of like, like, but because there are different, but then like I said, we have one client who's like, he really feels like he wants to have $1 billion company, right? The one day, like, and he has the mindset for it. He has he understands that he's putting a team in place to do this. He's so team focused, and he allows his team to, a lot of decisions are made in the teams and not by him anymore. And he's there, like I said, they're about, I don't know, 22, 25 million, somewhere in there right now. But it changes, the business changes. And so you don't have to, once you get to a certain level, there are people, I had she was on the CEO panel, Ray Ranigan, down at Win the Storm. I don't know if you got to meet her down there, but they have a business. Her and her husband have a company, and they did 2 million a year for a lot of years, and they were really happy with that. They had a great life,
Sure.
right? Good income, everything's good. And then they decided, you know what? We want to do something more for our community. We want to do something more for our church. So now their dream has expanded. And so, 10 years later, they're like, hey, we decide now we want to go here instead of what, right? We were happy with this until now. So no, you don't have to anything. Right? You don't have to anything.
That's the beauty of owning your business. You don't have to work, and you can let it die if you want,
Yep. I have stories of that where owners disappear and they go to, they're in other countries just relaxing and enjoying their lives, and slowly the business fades, and then they're like, whoa, hey, wait, got to get everything back and put it all back together, and then we'll it's
yeah, I thought I got to my dream, but
it
takes maintaining, right?
That's right, that maintenance. So there's a lot that goes into it, and so, but be yourself. Be yourself.
That is such a big one. And I know that it gets preached a lot. And I think sometimes it goes, I know it's happened to me before, where that concept of like, know thyself, right, has kind of gone over my head a little bit. But when people say you need to understand your definition of success, that's really critical, because if you don't, then you're always going to measure your success against somebody else's dream.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be able to accomplish somebody else's dream. So you have to have your own. I mean, if you don't have your own dream, then that's that comparison thing. And social media makes it so easy to play that game.
So easy. People
are flying around the country, and people are up on stage speaking, and people are on the cover of magazines. And if that's your dream, okay, then you need to understand that and chase that. But if you can't identify that as being your dream, then all you're going to do is compare yourself to somebody else rather than comparing yourself to where you want to be.
Yeah.
I've discovered something kind of, the more that I've thought about this, people have a different way of viewing their dreams and what they want. But what I'm starting to think, and I'm floating this out there because I haven't spoken about this publicly yet. So we'll float this out there.
That's right.
Almost everybody that I talk to has a very, very similar dream structurally. They want to gain control of their business. They want to grow their business because the end game is freedom. It's freedom of some kind, freedom of options, freedom of how much or how little they want to work, freedom to decide what they want to work on and when, right? And all that's really cool. But what varies in the dream is at what level you feel you have that. So for one of my clients wants to fly around in a private jet. That's an enormous amount of freedom, right? But there's a certain level he's got to get to in order for that freedom to be a reality, if that's how he defines it. For some people, it's, I'd really like to work maybe 30 hours a week. I'd like to work 30 hours a week and make, a decent income, however they define that. And I don't mind flying commercial, right? So that's their standard. But you know what? They both have the same dream.
Same dream.
Yeah, at the core, it's the same dream.
Freedom, right? Is the dream. Yeah, definitely. Freedom is the dream. What your definition within that is all that differs. Yeah,
there's some components to legacy that exist out there, and I've got some thoughts around that. I'm still kicking around. I'm not sure what those things are. What you leave behind I think is important. But there are a lot of really amazing, massive, life-changing industry or companies that have existed in the past, and we don't know who started them. We don't know what happened to them or where they went. And trying to find them is kind of tricky. So be careful getting caught up in the legacy movement, because you know what? 200 years from now, nobody's going to know Nathan Tebedo's name. And quite frankly, I'm not entirely sure that they'll know Jeff Bezos' name either.
They might not.
Maybe they won't. They might, and they might not. And if in 200 years from now, does Nathan really care? Not really.
So then, that's a question on legacy too, is are you in it for the fame, legacy, or are you or is it something that's within you that you are doing it without wanting the accolades from it? Another digital marketing agency owner that I know, he's doing a lot of great work down he's from Colombia, and he's doing a lot of great work down there with some orphanages and things like that. That's his legacy, right? Mm-hmm. That's his why. That's his legacy. The legacy that he is to change certain structural things in that area to a point where these children will not have to live through those types of things. But he's not doing it to have his name on the building. He's doing it as a personal mission, right? Like that's a little bit different in legacy. Is it that you want your name on the building or not, right? Like is it a personal mission?
I listened to Jim talk about this, and I'll be honest with you, Jim Johnson. I listened to him talk about this, and Jim, if you're listening to this, I apologize if I forget where. But the concept of maybe impact over legacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That you want to have an impact as much as possible, and whether people know your name or don't know your name is less important than the impact that you leave behind. I don't know. There's maybe something to that. Maybe I'll do a podcast about
it. Well, check out the podcast. What, the Contractor Show?
It's our podcast is Contractor Radio.
Contractor Radio.
Yeah.
Check out Contractor Radio.
Yeah, thank you.
There. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. If you would like to generate more sales through your digital marketing efforts, please visit roofermarketers.com and get a copy of the book, Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors, How to Triple Your Sales and Turn Your Roofing Website into an Online Lead Generation Machine. Also, check the training section of the website for guides on everything from running effective pay-per-click ads to how to properly set up your Google My Business listing. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Thanks for listening.